Hello and welcome to another comedian's interview for my blog and podcast, A Rich Comic Life. My name is Richard Gill and my blog describes my experiences of watching over 1,000 comedians over the last 47 years. I'm so delighted to welcome today my very special guest. It's the wonderful Milton Jones. Yay! Hello, mate. How are you?
I'm very good, Richard. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you very much. Thank you so much for doing this. It's very good of you.
You're welcome.
It's going to be an interview lasting about 45 minutes to an hour about your comedy career. And I'd like to kick off by going way back and asking, how did you become a comedian in the first place, please?
I never intended to be a comedian.
Right.
Depending who you listen to, some people think I'm still not a comedian.
That's not true.
I can introduce you to some people on social media. But anyway, I wanted to be an actor.
Right.
And I wanted to get people to see me do stuff. So I thought, well, I'll try stand-up comedy so that they can come along and see me do things.
Yeah.
And I tried doing that, and I wasn't very good, and I kept doing it. I played around with the character idea, and eventually it began to go well. So actually I was out of work as an actor. I'm a failed actor, basically. And gradually the stand-up took off. And also I started at a time where stand-up wasn't very big at all.
Right.
And gradually over the years, stand-up has become bigger. And, you know, in the old days, of course, as you know, it's called alternative comedy.
Exactly right.
And it is alternative no more.
No.
It is mainstream very much.
Yeah.
So I was there sort of for the whole birth and how it got to today, which coincided with me needing to earn a living, handily enough. So, you know, I've had a few good Edinburghs and picked up bits and pieces along the way and managed to make a living out of it. But it certainly wasn't my intention in the first place to be a stand-up comedian.
Sure. What sort of year was your first gig then? When did you first start?
Well, it's a little bit confused in that I sort of started and then stopped.
Right.
The very first open spot I ever did, I think, was in 1989.
Wow.
And then I started more 1990, 91. You know, I used to go along to the Bearcat Club, which is around the corner from me, and see people like Eddie Izzard and Frank Skinner and Jack D, and think, yeah, maybe I'd be able to do something like that. But it was a long way off, really, and there weren't so many clubs in those days.
Yeah.
And you had to travel, and it was hard work. But gradually it began to roll, and I was all. Sometimes younger comics ask me these days, how do you get involved in comedy? Unfortunately, I'm an expert about how to get involved in comedy in the 1990s.
Brilliant.
So I'm not much used to them today. I think it's changed again since, you know, in the last 10 years.
Sure. Yeah, it has. Yes.
More about social media, really, and podcasts and things, and less about Edinburgh. Actually, I think you know, you can get up and do your own thing on computers now. You know, on iPhones. And in the old days, we just had to be in front of a live crowd, and we were dependent on Time Out magazine and all those things. Whereas today, most advertising for clubs and shows is done on social media individually.
Yeah. I first came down to London from Carlisle in about 1988, and my brother lived in Stoke Newington in North London, and we used to go to the comedy all the time. We were the first bill on the Comedy Store I ever saw was Richard Morton, John Maloney, Phil Jupitus, Linda Smith, God bless her soul.
Oh, yeah.
And top of the bill was Charles Fleischer, who went on to voice Roger Rabbit. He was never heard of again. And I thought, I love this. I cannot get enough of this. And I would go to Jongleurs, and I'd go to up the creek and just build it all up. I've been 30 years in London, My very first ever comedy show was Les Dawson in 1977 on holiday, and that gave me the bug. And then I saw Tommy Cooper a year later. It was just extraordinary. So your first foray into comedy was about 89, 90, you say, and then you start again in 1991, 92. Can you remember your first ever gig? Was it like a 5-minute slot or in a pub or?
Yeah, sure. I remember doing something in a pub and starting off as an actor, I found it easy enough to write a script and learn it. But the problem was when someone interrupted you, when someone heckled you or it didn't go how you thought it was going to go. I remember the first open spot I did, I changed everything I was going to do on the way there.
Wow.
It's a totally stupid thing to do. And I made up a character on the way there, a Welsh character called Gut Morgan. And I ended up throwing pizzas at the crowd.
Oh, that's genius.
why that act didn't come off, I've no idea. But they all, basically, because it was a Welsh accent, the crowd all started doing sheep noises. And I only lasted about 2 minutes.
Oh, mate. I wish I'd been in the audience for that.
Well, you'll happily take my place, because I wasn't there. And it took me 2 years to do anything after that.
Right. Because I once had a go at stand-up comedy. I've told this to a lot of comedians. I knew a promoter who was in Edinburgh, and he said, I said, I want to get it out in the system. I want to have a go because I'm supporting them all. And he said, yeah. He said, we've got a gong show, which is for old women in the Haymarket on a Monday afternoon. It couldn't be worse. And I wrote a script, and he liked it. And I walked out, and I said, this is years ago. And the first thing I said to the audience was, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. People think I look like Eddie the Eagle Edwards, the ski jumper, but I can't see the resemblance myself. And I thought that was a fail-safe. Yeah. And a woman in the back of the crowd just went, fuck off, and gunned me off. And the promoter went, have another go. The same thing happened. And I thought, and I think my place is in the audience. Never say never again. But, mate, it was daunting. So you have my utmost respect for doing what you do. You're one of my favourite sort of comedians. I love gag tellers, and I love people who tell puns. I think it's genius. Where did the idea for the puns come along?
I think it was a mixture of things. When I was first started, I was terrified. So I needed to get to the joke really quickly.
Right.
So if you write short jokes, quite often puns and one-liners are the way to get there.
Yeah.
And I suppose also the other side is you kind of have to do what makes you laugh. And I quite like that sort of wordiness.
Yeah.
And also the sort of daft side of things.
Yeah, it's genius.
Just the nonsense. I enjoyed things like the Goons and Blackadder and just things that were just plain silly, as opposed to, because when we started, it was far more political in those days. It was very Thatcher out and the miners' strike and the dockers' strike. It was a lot of acts were quite vociferous in terms of politics, and that's where the whole no sexism, no racism, etc. came from, which has sort of stayed with us to some extent. But it was a different sort of atmosphere, and obviously that was a rebellion to the mainstream telling Irish jokes and mother-in-law jokes that was before us. But yes, I ended up doing short little gags. I was more inspired by people. I'd only ever seen people like do you remember Joker's Wild?
Very much so, Barry Cryer. Yeah.
Those guys doing jokes. But then I saw people on Saturday Night Live as well.
Yeah.
Jokes occasionally. And those were the ones I preferred. Quite often like the visual stuff, So, And once you start doing something, the bookers want to know what type of act you are.
Right.
So you get labelled quite early as he does that sort of thing.
Right.
So that gradually is how it evolved. And one-liners, as you know, is great for radio and TV because you get in straight away with the joke.
Yeah.
But it's much harder when you do an hour and a half show.
Yeah.
Because after about 15 minutes, you can see blood coming out of people's ears.
Oh, mate.
It sort of becomes too much information.
Yeah.
And you need to find a way of varying your plan of attack with music or props or something just to mix it up,
That's why your hour-long shows work, I think, because you bring in a lot of props. And you can move on to different sections, and it keeps the adrenaline going.
Yeah, I think so. I think 15 minutes is the time to do it. 15 minutes, change it around a bit, start again, have some pictures, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And keep the narrative going if you can, but just change it around. A bit of music or something. For sure.
It's interesting you mentioned Joker's Wild. On this podcast, I was extremely lucky to interview Barry Cryer just before the dear man passed on.
Oh, really?
And he was just a delight. All he wanted to do was tell jokes. And so I would say, you're one of my favourite comedians, which he was, because he wrote for everybody, and he'd look and there'd be a twinkle in his eye and he'd go, "You're the one." Just a wonderful...
yes.
You could tell what a great life he'd had, and he'd written for everybody.
Yes, and it was interesting when alternative comedy came about. The mainstream guys, of which he was one, divided in two in terms of some of them were really off with us. Yeah. Because, well, for a start, they didn't write their own material. So they were looking to nick gags, and we were very wary of them stealing stuff.
Right.
And they were thinking, who are these guys coming along, and they're not funny, and they swear a lot, or whatever it is. But Barry was one of the ones who welcomed everyone. Yeah. The comedy was more important to him than, the potential for work. I mean, I guess he had a self-belief as well that he would always work.
That's really interesting, because you could tell through certainly him collaborating with Ray Cameron with the Kenny Everett show. Ray Cameron was McIntyre's dad, Michael McIntyre's dad, and they could once he got to know Michael McIntyre, there was a lot of the newer comedians that would open up, and he in the interview when I chatted to him, there was lots of new references in there as well. He was an extraordinary character and much missed. To date, what has been your best and worst gig? You're one of my favourite comedians, and I can't ever imagine you having a bad gig.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think I heard Joe Brand say, one of the things about being a professional stand-up is, sometime in the next 6 months, a year, you will be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And you have to just learn to live with that, because it was a while ago now, I did the Cardiff Retail Awards.
Right.
And
right.
Just before I went on, someone said to me, they don't speak English, yeah? And basically they were all Indian and Chinese shopkeepers.
Wow.
And they did speak English, but it was definitely their second language. And it's just the wrong booking, isn't it? Does English wordplay. And so I did half an hour to the sound guy laughing, and 400 people just staring at me.
Nice.
So another time, I remember this was years ago, I used to the joke, you have to be able to see this to understand it. So I used to go out with a girl who was, deformed. Right? Okay. So
brilliant.
Right, I imagine this is a trade union congress, and the one time in my life I forgot to go like this.
Oh no!
So basically, all they heard was I used to go out with a girl who was 54. Silence, absolute stony silence. And then I started to get heckled by this old man who, he was so old you couldn't really do anything. Anyway, they booed me off, and then I missed the last train.
I couldn't be worse.
And I had to stay in a phone box on the station for the whole night.
Oh, mate.
And then when I got up, it was my birthday.
Oh, that's terrible. I hope you had a good birthday.
Yeah.
That's awful. Yeah. Oh man, but I say to a lot of the other comedians who've been on the interviews, my guess is to even have the difficult gigs, shall we call them, it must give you, every time you do one, it gives you the experience to be a better comedian, good or bad gig. You agree with that?
It's painful, but you learn far more from a failure than you do from a success.
Yeah.
And when you see someone get heckled and they come back with something brilliant, and you wonder how on earth they did that.
Yeah.
I'd say 9 times out of 10, it's because that heckle or something similar has happened to them before, and they had nothing.
Right.
And they worked out in the car on the way home what they would do next time that came up. So yes, it was spontaneous, but it was because they'd failed before.
Exactly. Yeah. Interesting.
So much of the business is not being able to cope with something and then working out how you're going to do it next time.
Yeah. Have you had a favourite gig? Have you had a memorable gig? You must have had many.
I mean, when you start, you just want to get paid.
Yeah.
When you get paid, you want to headline a show.
Right.
When you headline a show, you want to play the Comedy Store. When you do the Comedy Store, you want to do an hour's Edinburgh show. So the goalposts are moving all the time.
Right, yeah.
But, there have been certain shows like you sort of pinch yourself up when you go to Hong Kong for the first time and everyone's listening to you and you're getting paid to do it. You pinch yourself when you find yourself doing a show at Sydney Opera House in Australia. You pinch yourself, when you look out and you see Charles and Camilla in the third row, and you go, well, don't think about that. Don't think about that.
Just do it.
I remember once doing a show and what's his name from the Jam?
Paul Weller, Bruce Foxton.
Paul Weller started to heckle me.
Oh wow!
And he was quite friendly. And then I looked around and there was Robbie Williams. What is this? And it was a club in Kensington, but actually those are quite hard to come back to, because you're almost in your head. You're going flipping heck. But it's nice to have sort of worked hard enough to be in those situations.
Of course, yeah. Well done, you. Yeah.
Sort of mixing and sort of you've taken a path you didn't expect to end up where you end up.
Sure, yeah. Was there ever a point in your career where you thought, yes, I can do this well and I can make a career out of this?
I think a lot of comedians have two minds on this, in that, in a way, we can't believe we're still getting away with it.
Good answer.
That point has never actually come yet. Look at our watches and think, right, I've done my time, I'm getting off.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there are moments where I'm in control of an audience. I feel completely relaxed, and I think to myself, I'm enjoying this, and the crowd seems to be enjoying it too. Brilliant. This feels like what I was made to do.
Yeah, brilliant. Following on from that, when you walk onto a stage, you always seem to be very, very confident, and you're determined to make that audience laugh. How do you cope with any nerves, if you get them, before you go on stage?
I mean, these days, I mean, obviously when I started, I couldn't eat for the whole of the day. I always prayed that the venue would burn down before I got there. And you sort of hope that it will be somehow called off, the whole thing. But that's terror.
Yeah.
You want a bit of adrenaline, but not terror.
Yeah.
So my problem now for most shows is that I have to really make an effort to concentrate because I'm not scared. And
that's great.
It's only really something like live television or a difficult corporate event where I know that there are other things going on that I maybe get a bit nervous. So, but I don't want the terror. So I don't want to be. I'd say most of when I've made mistakes in performing is when I've been complacent.
Right.
So there's something about a bit of nerves that makes it go better.
Right.
Whereas if I think, now I can do this, I'll think of something when I get there. That's when it goes wrong, for me anyway. Right. And just in those few seconds before a show, I'll just try and center myself. I'll pray to God that the audience enjoys it and that I'll do my best. And then I take a deep breath and I step on stage.
Wow. How do you remember all your jokes? Do you have a way of remembering them all?
Well, sometimes I don't remember them. As long as I don't forget halfway through a joke, then it goes okay. But because of the character, I can usually sort of pull a face and get out of it. Anyway.
Yeah.
But I tend to remember them in bunches of subject, in that I stick the relationship jokes together, I stick the school jokes together, I stick the family jokes together. But what you have to do within that is what the worst thing can happen is that the audience are slightly ahead of you.
Right.
And guess what the answer is going to be. So you want to get the punchlines different in the formulas of the punchlines must be different so that people don't see it coming. And that's always the tricky thing, because you've got to test it out, and then put them in an order where people won't begin to guess where it's coming from. So they're under subject, and then some jokes follow on better from others.
Yeah, fascinating. That really is fascinating. And it's extraordinary that you wanted to be an actor initially, and you're playing a part of the comedian. The most creative thing I've done other than this blog was write a play which myself and my mate put on for Comic Relief. It was originally for Edinburgh. It's called The Applicant, and it's about it's basically me who comes to London from Carlisle and has never had a job, never had an interview, and he's got a successful girlfriend who's got a very good job. And each scene is him in the waiting room waiting to be interviewed. So he starts chatting to the audience, and then the interviewer comes on and interviews him. It builds up and builds up. And I wrote this play we had about 10 weeks to rehearse it. And when I ran out on the first night, I completely forgot the monologue that I wrote. And I was like a rabbit in headlights. I was so gutted because I wrote the thing, and it was like, and it's interesting when you say that the comedian is an act, which obviously it is, but do you think that wanting to be an actor or having trained as an actor helped you to become what you are?
Yeah, for sure. And it wasn't until I played around with the hair and the shirts that I thought, oh, this is not me.
Yeah.
This is a character that I'm playing. And also then it became easier to write because you're thinking, what would this character do in this situation?
Brilliant. Yeah.
And I think that, if it works, well, certainly all the best comedians create a world when they come on that you're not particularly aware of, but, there are things that can happen in that world that are illogical, and people will go with it because you're committed to the world. You don't just look like a bloke who's making it up. You're really committed to going for it. So yes, as I say, the thing I found difficult was if I was interrupted by someone shouting out. They don't teach you that in drama school.
No.
So you only learn that by doing it on the job.
Yeah. Apart from your good self, the two that come immediately to mind are Harry Hill with his world and Reeves and Mortimer with their world. I saw Reeves and Mortimer. I've seen them many times live, but I saw them at the Big Night Out on tour in 1990. And Les, who was the character in Big Night Out, walked on, climbed up a ladder, and started fishing for loaves of bread. And when he caught one with a fishing rod, the audience went bananas. And I'm thinking, what sort of world is this? But of course, it's exactly what you're saying, And Harry Hill's another one who creates all these characters. Let's move on to Edinburgh. I am extremely fortunate to be able to go to the Edinburgh Fringe every year. It's my holiday. And I see about 50 shows in a week that I'm there. I'm absolutely exhausted, but I have the best time. And whenever you're playing Edinburgh, we always make a point of seeing you because your shows are just phenomenal. You're a very, very, very funny man, and we all enjoy them. What was your first Edinburgh Fringe like? What year was it?
I did a sketchy show in 1990. No, 89 maybe. But really out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And then I did what is these days called the Good Value Show or Big Value Show.
Big Value Show, yeah.
In 95.
Right.
And in those days, it was under a club called Screaming Blue Murder.
Yeah.
They did it. And then 96 was my first proper solo show.
First proper hour-long show,
yeah?
Yeah.
So, that was at the Cabaret Bar in the Pleasance. And, it was really hard to get people in. And unfortunately, I won Best Newcomer at the end of it.
Yeah.
So that all worked out. But obviously, in those days, Edinburgh was a bit smaller, and also it was all Perrier sponsored at that point.
Yeah, that's right.
Sort of was a better branding because no one quite knows who it is now. And very exciting and frightening at the same time. Lots of people and also jumping from 20 minutes to an hour is more than 320s put together.
Yeah.
You've got to have a bit of a story and something different about it, and a big risk really. And but it seemed to work, and I think that was when my training as an actor came in a bit more, because I don't know, people at the Fringe expect you not just to be a club comic; they want a bit more, some kind of something different, something with props, or they don't want to see you just do a club set.
Yeah.
And that's where it worked for me. So, but still, it's a long time ago.
And you've been doing Edinburgh practically every year since, haven't you?
Well, at the moment, I'm on every other year. Obviously, in the last couple of years, no one's done Edinburgh.
Yeah.
But, I'm sort of every other year I'm doing it. I find the turnaround to write an hour's worth of one-liners in 1 year is too much. So every other year works for me better. I'm fortunate now that I'm better known in that I don't have to spend hours leafleting and
no.
And all that stuff.
You don't miss that, do you?
Not at all. I think I came on last time and said it's great to be back at the International Leaflet Festival.
Brilliant. There's so much paper wasted, I know.
Absolutely.
But there's this extraordinary atmosphere when you step off a train at Waverley and it just hits you and you just think this is extraordinary, because the amount of wonderful talent vying for your time is amazing. And I'm one of these people who do an enormous spreadsheet and try and fit everybody in, and all my friends come along at different times, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful experience. Having said the fact that you deservedly won the 1996 Perrier Award for Best Newcomer, congratulations. Can you describe the experience of winning the competition, and what is your view of comedy competitions in general?
I mean, at the time it was great for me because I was on the edge of almost giving up.
All right.
In terms of, I was making slow progress, but I wasn't quite making a living at it.
Right.
But it was after that I began to headline clubs and things, and people started phoning me as opposed to me phoning them. And that was important for my confidence as well.
Of course.
To think, that I'm on the right route. I think kind of competitions are a necessary evil within comedy. And, when someone's able to put a quote or a thing on a poster that says they won something, it's a bit like a doctor or a professor being able to put letters after their name.
Yeah.
It's a qualification of some sort. But if you don't win it, doesn't mean that you're no good. It's just lucky if you do win it, because, to be honest, in my experience, there's quite a lot of politics in the whole thing. You've got to remember who won it last year, what the trend is at the moment. Literally, I think what happened with me, I heard afterwards, was that quite often, because there's a panel of judges usually, and the panel is split between two acts, and so they compromise on a third one to win it.
Right.
So you end up with actually someone who's the third favourite of everyone being the winner.
Right.
And because they it was chalk and cheese with the other two.
Yeah.
And so you've just got to be in the right place at the right time, really. If you get nominated, great. Just be happy with that, and if you don't get nominated, Al Murray, I remember Sean Locke not being nominated for years and years and years.
I remember that. I thought that was disgraceful.
And no one could understand it, really. Yeah. And I remember Al Murray being nominated and never winning for years.
Yeah.
And
the other one was James Acaster. He was nominated for years, and everybody thought he was going to get it, and he never did.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I don't think, awards are... there's one ridiculous year, and I forget which one it was, but it had... Was it Dylan Moran? No, that was the year before, but it had something like Eddie Izzard, Frank Skinner, Alan Davis, and Jack Dee, or something like that.
Wow.
How would you choose anyway?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is. Do you think, following on from that, do you think that they help with promotion for the comedian?
Yeah, sure. And it's something you gets the attention of people who didn't know who you were before. And I think Harry Hill said, awards are given so that the press know who they like.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
That is so good. What is ingenious, I always think, about your act is that you can take words from the audience and create jokes off one word. I remember sitting at Edinburgh with my friends, and the word was Carlisle that I yelled out at you, and you came back with this incredible one-liner that I was laughing so hard I missed half the joke. But you are so good at picking off words. How do you do this? How is there a process of doing this? Do you have them all in your mind?
Well, yes, I have been doing it nearly 30 years, so I have a big back catalogue that I try and remember. And sometimes you can fit an old formula into a new joke.
Sure.
You just change the words around and you hope it comes out right. Occasionally, you're able to think of something on the spot. And quite often, if it's spontaneous, you get away with something that wouldn't really stand up as a joke if you just had it in your normal set. But it's because everyone can see it's so quick.
Yeah.
That you sort of get away with it, and you get the applause because you took a risk and you sort of got away with it.
Sure.
And that's often, it's like being heckled and being able to deal with it. It's often the bit that people remember of a show because that was the bit that was special that night.
Sure, yeah. Do you have joke books? Do you write jokes in books like Bob Monkhouse did?
No, I actually, while we're on Bob Monkhouse, he was another one of the older crowd who was welcoming. To the new guys. I don't write them. I have got computer files, which I guess is the same sort of thing.
Same sort of thing,
so I never throw anything away as well. I've got ideas that I haven't been able to make work for like 10, 15 years. I've still got them on my files going, one day this is going to work.
There's 15 more years at least of you. It's wonderful.
Yes.
When you say about Bob Monkhouse, there's a section in my blog called The Ones That Got Away, and he was one of them. I would have loved to have seen him live. I thought he was a wonderful comic, but I never did get the chance. Top of the tree for me were Morecambe and Wise. I never saw them, but I've seen everything about them. Bob Monkhouse was another. Dave Allen was another. There were all these great storytellers, jokers, one-liners, and I just love that. I'm fascinated how it comes about. You are a wonderful stand-up comedian, as I say. You're one of my favourites. You're also a regular on television's Mock the Week. I'd like to know how Mock the Week came about, for one thing, and you've also had many a radio series, including The House of Milton Jones and Thanks a Lot, Milton Jones, which I listened to on Radio 4. Do you think there's a different approach to writing for TV and radio as opposed to stand-up comedy?
Yes. I mean, obviously the formats are different. In terms of Mock the Week, I was asked to do it. I did a video of my own show.
Right.
And the producer, executive producer, said it was also the same as the one who does Mock the Week.
Right.
So he said, "Oh, you must come on." I wasn't sure at all because really I felt like I wasn't that style of comedian. But I had a friend, Stuart Francis, who had been on, and he does one-liners.
Yeah, I know him well. Yeah.
So I thought, when you're asked to do something like that, you feel like you can't really turn it down.
Yeah.
Because anyway, I went on and it was a little bit frightening to do it at first because it was, Russell Howard and the old crowd.
Yeah.
They were very much, it seemed very competitive. In fact, my wife at the end of the show said there was so much testosterone on that stage. People trying to outdo each other.
Yeah.
But I sort of waited my turn and just said what I said. And I did 4 or 5 more that year. And it was, it's like putting an advert through everyone's door, basically.
Yeah.
And by the end, people say, "Oh, you're a new comedian." Well, no, I've been around quite a long time, actually. But, yeah. So I was able to tour and stuff off the back of that.
Yeah.
And also, as I say, with one-liners, they're good for television.
Yeah.
Because you get straight into the joke. So if you're a storyteller, doing Mock the Week is really almost impossible because it takes too long to get going. Whereas one-liners are handy, and also the editor likes them because they're a good way of ending that particular round or whatever.
Yeah.
A clean laugh is done. Whereas when we do a radio show, it's a half-hour narrative. So I work with James Carey, who's a writer, and Dan Evans. I don't know if you've seen Dan Evans.
Yeah, superb. Yeah.
He helps me with bits of writing sometimes. So he works on the radio, and so we'll all get together. David Tyler, the producer, we'll busk ideas. I mean, literally, I've just done another one which will go out in May, I hope. But it will be, altogether over the years, we've done 80 episodes.
Wow.
So, which is great, but occasionally we'll sort of jam some new ideas, and then something will come really easily. And the reason it's come really easy is because we did it last time.
Right. Yes.
We've done it so many episodes that it's quite easy to reinvent ones you've already done. But the thing with radio is it's a lot of words. There's no, face pulling in it.
Yeah.
You can use music and things, but half an hour of radio it's 6,000 or 7,000 words, which is a lot of jokes.
Yeah. What's fascinating about watching you on Mock the Week, excuse me, is when you're doing the stand-up challenge, for example, the rest of the comedians are waiting in anticipation for what you're going to say with your one-liners, where if you look at other comedians, whatever subject they're given, they, as you say, try and build up a story and all the rest of it. But because you're one-liner in, it's wonderful to see, because you're thinking, what's he going to say next? Oh yes, of course, and it links on from that, and it's great. It's such a talent.
Well, yes, thank you. It's easy for me to get to the jokes quickly, and I try and keep it as loose as I can.
Yeah.
Trying to incorporate anything in that's happened, or if something doesn't work, I'll say it doesn't work. Or I did a bit the other week. I started this. Well, this is a few years ago now. I said, right, I'm going to skip a bit now, and then I skipped a bit around the stage.
Visual as well.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Do you have any more ambitions as a comedian? You've done ever so well so far with your career.
I'd like to be in a sitcom, a big British sitcom. I don't need to be the lead character.
Wow.
I'd like to be, Boise in Only Fools and Horses. Or,
that would be perfect.
or what, Corporal Jones in Dad's Army.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Well, you never know. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. I've tried to get my own shows away over the years and done pilots, and it's never quite taken off, or just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I would like to do something else like that. And I'd like to keep going as long as I can with this, and who knows where comedy will go in the future. But I'm lucky to have, fortunately, the demographic for something like Mock the Week is quite young.
Yeah.
Which means they all keep coming to see me.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or what happens is that I look out into the audience and they're whole families, because Radio 4 is older people and Mock the Week is younger people, and therefore I end up with quite a pantomime type crowd, which I really like, actually.
That's great. Yeah. That's so good, because of course the more people you can get and the more different ages and demographics, the better it is for you. How have you found online gigs as opposed to live gigs? Have you done many of them?
I've done some, and they're better than not working.
Right.
but not much.
No.
Because they're two types, aren't there? There's one where there is an audience, but they're in little boxes.
Yeah.
And there are only about 12 of them or something, even though more people are listening. But the camera goes to whoever coughs last. And so you can be in the middle of something and the dog barks, and all of a sudden the camera goes to them.
Yeah.
And it's much harder to control the room, because it isn't a room. The only upside is that a local club in Battersea or whoever will put on a Zoom gig, and people in Finland can tune in.
Yeah.
And so you end up with a much bigger audience.
Yeah. I'm exactly the same. I mean, when lockdown hit, thank God for online comedy. It was a very good medium to get everybody together. but when it first started off, there was no audio on them at all. And I would sit here laughing with my loud laugh, laughing at four walls. I thought I was going to get taken away. You know, I didn't know what was going to go on. But when they started opening up the front rows and whatnot, the comedians could try and keep a beat and could have a conversation, etc., etc. But you cannot beat live. I'm so pleased it's back. I mean, I love to go out on a Saturday night and have a few drinks and then sit down and just laugh like a drain at the bill, because it's of its moment. You know, you just do not know what's going to happen, and it's just magical when it works.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yes, and also there were a few gigs that were not Zoom gigs, but like car park gigs, you know, where
yes, I heard about these.
People would literally turn up in their cars, and instead of clapping, the windscreen wipers would go. And
I hope you were told that would happen before you did your set. Who makes you laugh? Who are your favourite comedians, past and present?
So, as I say, I was more inspired by people like Rowan Atkinson, or in Blackadder, or Ronnie Barker even, or Leonard Rossiter. So the guys in sitcoms years ago, I preferred that. And then when I first went to see stand-up, as I say, it was Eddie Izzard, Jack D, Frank Skinner, people who were clearly just breaking through.
Yeah.
These days, it's difficult because some of them are my friends.
Right.
But I mean, I admire people like Bill Bailey, for instance, who could do anything.
Yeah.
Literally. So he could do one-liners, he could do stories, he could do music.
Yeah.
And he can present stuff as well. You go, well, that's just everything.
He is amazing. Yeah.
I enjoy Harry Hill for his sheer commitment to nonsense.
He's so good.
Brilliant stuff. And also, I've got a theory too, that the better you are, the more you divide people.
Yeah.
In that, do you know what I mean? In that, you'll find with Michael McIntyre, Harry Hill, lots of the big people, that there are loads of people who really, really like them. But there are also other people for whom they've no idea what it's about.
I love that. I love that fact. I first saw McIntyre in a hut at the Edinburgh Fringe. He played about 30 people, and you could tell he was going to be. He just had it. It was amazing. And I first saw Harry Hill 30 odd years ago, and to this day he's got my favourite opening line to any gig. He brushed past me. It was downstairs at the King's Head. And he jumped up on stage and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry I'm late. I had to have a testicle brought down." And there was a laugh. And then he said, "From Derby." And when I met him, I told him this story. And he went, "Oh, Richard," he said, "I use this all the time." It's wonderful. But I'm with you. I saw Frank Skinner when he first started. I saw Alan Davis when he first started. The reason for the laugh, that came from a family holiday in Torquay when we went to see Tom O'Connor, of all people. And he walked on, and this was in the 70s, he walked on and he started telling his jokes. I would be about 10 years old, and I burst out laughing, and it floored him. He actually couldn't continue his jokes. So he walked off and then came back on again. I went, "That was me." And I thought, well, there you go. So, but there's so many memories, and of course that's why the blog exists. Like me, before when you now a comedian, or if you were before you were a comedian, did you go to a lot of gigs as a member of the audience?
Yeah, for about 2 years I did. Just to see what I really liked two of the acts and not the other two. I went to lots of local gigs. I stood on my own at the back with a pint of cider and tried to make it last the evening.
Wow.
And just to see what, how people coped with different situations, and until eventually I had to give it a try. And,
yeah. And if you're on a bill of comedians, do you stay and watch them all if you're on first, or do you tend to do that?
Sometimes I'm on first because I'm doubling up somewhere else.
Right.
I need to get on. Usually, if they're friends, usually I stay.
Sure.
Sometimes I may have seen someone recently, or that I need to get on for some other reason. But I try to stay where I can.
Yeah.
Just because, especially with people I like, and see there's nothing like seeing someone you really like who you haven't seen for a while, and they've got lots of new stuff, and you can talk about it afterwards. How to make it work better, or whatever, and it's all a bit of a social occasion as well.
Yeah. Well, my friend, this has been an absolute joy tonight. I've so enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Very nice to talk to you, and thank you for laughing through all my gigs so far.
Well, long may they continue, because I've seen you so many times over the years. I think you're one of the best out there, certainly for one-liners. Is there anything else you'd like to say just before we go? Where can people find you on social media?
Well, MiltonJones.com has got all my latest dates, and I go back on tour in the middle of May for 2 weeks, and then in the autumn I'm back on tour as well. So because of COVID, all the dates mashed up. So, but MiltonJones.com has got all the usual
brilliant
stuff. So,
well, yeah. I'm gonna come and see you very, very soon, and cool. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been wonderful.
Good to talk to you, Richard.
All the very best to you, and thank you.
See ya.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.